The alarm didn't wake Arthur Pendleton. He was already standing at the kitchen stove, spatula in hand, watching the eggs sizzle in butter when 6:47 a.m. rolled across the microwave clock. He had barely slept. He rarely did anymore. The kitchen of their rented house on Birchwood Lane was modest, clean, but modest. Mismatched chairs around a wooden table, a refrigerator door held up by a sunflower magnet, and one of Lily's crayon drawings. A coffee maker that coughed and sputtered every morning, but always, eventually, delivered. Arthur wouldn't have traded any of it. He heard the soft pad of small feet on the hallway floor before he saw her. Lily, 7 years old and still half asleep, her blonde hair tangled from the pillow, clutching the stuffed rabbit he'd bought her 2 Christmases ago. She was wearing dinosaur pajamas, 2 sizes too big, the hem dragging on the linoleum. "Morning, Lily Bear," Arthur said softly, without turning. "Mornin', Daddy." Her voice was still clouded with sleep. She climbed into her chair and propped the rabbit against the sugar bowl with solemn precision. "Are those the eggs with the crispy edges?" "The very same." "Good." She nodded, as if this were a matter of great national importance. Arthur smiled. It was the truest smile he owned. He slid the eggs onto her plate with 2 strips of turkey bacon and a glass of orange juice, poured himself a mug of black coffee, and sat across from her, watching her eat with the concentrated seriousness that only a 7-year-old could bring to scrambled eggs. She had her mother's eyes, green and wide and impossibly thoughtful. He still couldn't look at them for too long on some mornings. "Do I have to wear the brown sweater today?" Lily asked. "It's going to be cold, sweetheart." Madison said it looks like a potato sack. Arthur's jaw tightened, just briefly, barely perceptibly. He kept his voice even. "Madison can keep her opinions to herself. You look fine. You look perfect." Lily considered this with the gravity of a judge reviewing evidence. "Okay," she said simply, and returned to her eggs. That was one of the things he loved most about her, her capacity to accept his reassurances with a quiet grace, even when, deep down, he knew she had absorbed far more of the cruelty directed at her than she ever let on. By 7:30, they were in the truck. It was a 2009 Ford F-150, rusted at the wheel wells, with a heater that only worked on the driver's side. Arthur wore his usual, faded Wranglers, a dark green flannel shirt, work boots worn down at the heel. His hands were calloused from genuine outdoor work. He spent weekends fixing fences and repairing the gutters of the house he rented, because idleness had become unbearable to him in the years since Sarah died. The grease under his fingernails was entirely real. He could have had a driver. He could have had 12 drivers. He had, at last count, a personal staff of 43 across his private residences. He had a Gulfstream G700 sitting in a hangar at a private airfield 30 miles east of Millbrook. He chose the truck. He always chose the truck. Oak Ridge Academy sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds in the most affluent zip code in the county. Stone pillars flanked the iron gate. A bronze plaque read, "Excellence, Integrity, Legacy." The drop-off lane at 7:45 was a slow procession of gleaming luxury vehicles. Mercedes G-Wagons, a cobalt blue Bentley, 2 matching Range Rovers, and a Porsche Cayenne with a personalized plate that read SDRLN1. Arthur pulled his truck into line. In his rearview mirror, he caught the precise moment the woman in the Bentley, Victoria Sterling, though he didn't know her name yet, glanced over and let her lip curl. Her eyes swept over his truck with the particular contempt of someone who has never once considered that a thing's value might be invisible. He did not react. He was very practiced at not reacting. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and gathered her backpack, a basic navy one from Target, a little worn at the strap. Arthur came around and crouched down in front of her, adjusting the collar of her brown sweater. "You're going to have a great day," he told her. She gave him a small, uncertain smile. "Promise. I promise that you are one of the best people in that building, no matter what anybody says." She hugged him around the neck, and he held on for 2 seconds longer than the situation strictly required. He watched her walk through the gate, small and serious, clutching her straps, and he didn't get back in the truck until she had disappeared through the front doors. Inside, Clara Evans was already at her classroom door, coffee thermos in hand, greeting her students as they arrived. She was 28, with warm brown eyes, dark hair pinned back in a practical bun, and a smile she gave freely and without condition to every child who passed her. She taught second grade, and she loved it in the way some people love breathing, as something essential and non-negotiable. She saw Lily come in. She always noticed Lily. The little girl's sneakers, white canvas, the kind that came in a 4-pack from a discount shop, had a small hole beginning at the left toe. The sole was starting to separate at the heel of the right one. Clara filed this away with the quiet, professional sadness of a teacher who has learned to notice what parents think nobody sees. "Good morning, Lily," she said, crouching to eye level. Lily's face lit up, genuinely, fully, the way it rarely did around her peers. "Good morning, Miss Evans. How are we today?" "Good." Then, more quietly, "My eggs had crispy edges." Clara laughed. "Well, that sounds like a very good morning indeed." She squeezed Lily's shoulder. "Go pick your seat. We're doing art today." Lily's whole face changed at the word art. She practically skipped to her desk. Clara straightened and turned back to the corridor, where Victoria Sterling was just arriving with her daughter Emma. Designer backpack, French braided hair, patent leather shoes that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent. Victoria glanced into the classroom, found Lily at her desk, and something flickered across her perfectly maintained face. Not malice, exactly, just a casual, reflexive dismissal. The way a person might glance at a piece of furniture that doesn't belong. Clara's smile did not waver, but her grip tightened, almost imperceptibly, on her coffee thermos. The invitations appeared on a Thursday. Emma Sterling's 8th birthday party was the social event of the second grade calendar. Victoria had rented the private function room at the Millbrook Country Club, hired a professional face painter, a pony, and, reportedly, a miniature Ferris wheel. The invitations were printed on thick cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, tucked into pearlescent envelopes. 23 of them arrived in 23 backpacks. Lily's backpack remained flat. She noticed at lunch, when Madison Shun laid her invitation on the cafeteria table and Emma began collecting them like a queen receiving tributes. Lily watched, quietly, as she always did, as every child produced theirs, smoothing them out with pride, comparing the gold-lettered script. Lily looked at her sandwich. She looked at the space in front of her where an envelope was not. She did not say anything. Not to her classmates. Not to Clara, who had not been watching at precisely that moment, and who spent the rest of the afternoon quietly cursing herself for it. Lily held it together through the afternoon, through dismissal, through the walk to the truck where her father was waiting, engine running. She held it together until she was through the front door of their house on Birchwood Lane. Then she dropped her backpack in the hallway, walked to her room, sat on her bed with her stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest, and cried. Arthur heard it from the kitchen, where he was pulling the cork from a bottle of sparkling water. The sound hit him like something physical. He set the bottle down very carefully on the counter. He knocked twice on her door, their rule, and opened it. She had her back to him, curled on her side, the rabbit tucked under her chin. Her shoulders shook in that silent, devastating way that only children cry when they've been trying to be brave for too long and their body has simply run out of the capacity to hold it in. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't say anything immediately. He put one large, rough hand on her back and let her feel that he was there. "Lily Bear," he said after a while. "They didn't invite me," she whispered. He already knew. He'd known something like this was coming since the first morning she'd climbed back into the truck with that careful look on her face. That particular, heartbreaking expression she'd inherited from no one, because no one had taught her to absorb unkindness that quietly. She'd learned it herself, and that was somehow worse. "Whose party?" he asked, though he suspected. "Emma's." She rolled over to look at him. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks blotched red. "Everyone got one, Daddy. Everyone. Even Tommy Graves, and he picks his nose at lunch. But not me. I know, sweetheart. Why don't they like me?" Her voice cracked on the last word in a way that had no clinical name, but landed in Arthur's chest like a nail. "Is it because of my sneakers?" Madison says a lot of things. She said my sneakers were ugly. She said Mommy must not have cared about me because she left. A pause. I told her Mommy didn't leave on purpose. Arthur closed his eyes. He took one steady breath. When he opened them, his expression was gentle and his voice was as even as he could make it. "You are absolutely right. Mommy didn't leave on purpose. And anyone who says otherwise doesn't understand what love looks like." "What does love look like?" He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "It looks like crispy-edged eggs at 6:45 in the morning." She almost smiled. Almost. He stayed with her until she fell asleep, one hand loosely holding his finger, the rabbit tucked between them. Then he walked out to the porch and stood in the cold evening air and looked at the dark sky. And he let himself feel, very privately, very quietly, the particular fury that overtakes a man when he remembers that all the money in the world cannot protect the people he loves from ordinary, garden-variety cruelty. He went inside and called Margaret, his executive assistant, a composed woman who had been with him for 11 years, at 9:30. "I'm going to Oak Ridge tomorrow morning," he said. "Shall I arrange?" "No. I'm going as myself." There was the briefest pause. Margaret had long since learned that myself meant the flannel shirt, the truck, and the calloused hands. Not the boardroom Arthur. Not the Arthur who could stop a stock market rumor with a single press release. "I understand," she said. "Also, Margaret, find me everything there is to know about a woman named Victoria Sterling." The information arrived in his email by 6 the next morning. He read it over his coffee without expression. But his eyes, in the pale kitchen light, had taken on a quality that his lawyers had learned to recognize over the years. Not angry, precisely. Just very, very still. Still in the way that deep water is still, not because nothing is there, but because everything is there and none of it is moving yet. The confrontation happened on a Friday afternoon, in the breezeway that connected the school's main building to the gymnasium. Clara had been walking back from a staff meeting when she heard Victoria's voice. That particular tone, lacquered and sharp, that Victoria used when she felt completely untouchable. "The issue," Victoria was saying, "is optics. Oak Ridge has a reputation to maintain. When parents drop their children off and see that truck, that man, it sends a message." 3 women stood with her: Diane Whitmore, whose husband ran a regional bank chain; Patrice Lowndes, whose family had endowed the school's science wing; and Stacy Beaumont, who served no visible function except to laugh at Victoria's jokes at the precise correct moment. They formed a tight, fragrant cluster. Expensive coats, tasteful jewelry, the collective air of people who have confused proximity to wealth with the possession of virtue. Clara stopped walking. "And the child," Patrice added, with a look of delicate distaste. "She's sweet enough, I suppose. But she doesn't fit the culture," Victoria supplied. "Exactly. There's a culture here. Standards. If any family with a discount store wardrobe can waltz in, Lily Pendleton is one of the most gifted students I have," Clara said. All 4 women turned. Victoria's expression cycled through surprise, irritation, and contempt in approximately 1 second. "Miss Evans," she said, drawing herself up. "This is a private conversation." "You're standing in a school hallway," Clara said. "Nothing here is private." She stepped forward. She kept her voice completely level, which cost her considerably more than it appeared. "Lily is 7 years old. She is kind, she is creative, and she works harder than any student in my class. The fact that her family isn't wealthy is not a character flaw." "No one said it was a character flaw," Victoria said smoothly. "We're simply discussing the school's culture of excellence, which I would expect a teacher to understand." "What I understand," Clara said, "is that you deliberately excluded that child from your daughter's birthday party, that every child in that class received an invitation except her, and that she cried herself to sleep because of it. Her voice didn't shake. That's not culture. That's cruelty. And if you attempt to involve my students in your social politics again, I will be filing a formal complaint." "A formal complaint?" Victoria let out a short, musical laugh. "With whom exactly?" "Principal Higgins." She tilted her head with the practiced grace of someone delivering a verdict. "Darling, my husband's company funded the new library extension. I think we both know how that conversation ends." A pause, perfectly calibrated. "Perhaps you should focus on teaching. And be grateful you still have a position to return to on Monday." Silence. Clara held Victoria's gaze for a long, level moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Shame on you." She walked away. She didn't see Arthur until she turned the corner. He was standing near the wall. He'd come early to collect Lily, had taken a wrong turn looking for the second-grade hallway, and had stopped dead when he heard the voices. He'd stood there for the entire exchange, motionless, one hand resting against the painted cinder block. He was watching Clara walk toward him with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not quite surprise. Something more like recognition. "Mr. Pendleton," she said, startled. "I'm sorry. Were you?" I heard, he said. What you just did. He paused. That took guts. Clara exhaled. It was probably stupid. It wasn't. His voice was quiet, straightforward. No performance in it. No social lubrication. It's harder to stand up for someone else than for yourself. Most people don't bother. She looked at him then. Really looked, for maybe the first time. She'd seen him before in the drop-off line, registered him as a working-class father with tired eyes and a gentle way with his daughter. Up close now, she noticed other things. The way he stood, perfectly still, like a man who had learned a long time ago not to waste motion. The quiet intelligence in his dark eyes. The fact that even in a worn flannel shirt, he occupied space with a kind of unassuming authority she'd only ever encountered in people who had absolutely nothing left to prove. She's a wonderful little girl, Clara said. Lily, I want you to know that. Something moved across his face. Not much, just a small, complicated softening around the eyes. She's the best person I know, he said. And that's not fatherly bias. She's genuinely, objectively the best person. Clara smiled, a real one. I believe you. They stood for a moment in the particular quiet of two people who have just, without ceremony or planning, begun to trust each other. I'm going to make sure she's protected, Clara said. I want you to know that, too. Arthur looked at her steadily. I know, he said. And then, almost to himself, so will I. Later, sitting in his truck while Lily chatted about the painting she was working on, Arthur stared at the school's stone facade through the windshield. The bronze plaque caught the afternoon light. Excellence, integrity, legacy. He took out his phone and sent a message to Margaret. 3 words, start the paperwork. He'd been patient for 4 months. He'd wanted Lily to have something normal, something unblemished by his name and his money and the particular weight those things carried. He'd thought a used truck and a flannel shirt would buy her that. He had not accounted for the specific, practiced viciousness of people who use children as social props. He put the phone away and turned to Lily. How's the painting coming? It's a horse, she said. But the legs are hard. Horses' legs are notoriously difficult, he agreed seriously. Even professional painters struggle with them. Really, ask anyone. She laughed, bright and unself-conscious. And he felt, for a moment, that things might still be all right. The Oak Ridge Academy annual Spring Charity Gala was the school's crowning social event. Every year, the gymnasium was transformed, draped silk, string lights, round tables with elaborate centerpieces, and the children of each class performed something for the assembled parents. The proceeds went to the school's scholarship fund, which sounded noble and was, in practice, entirely controlled by the PTA. Victoria Sterling ran the gala committee with the focused energy of a military campaign. The program assignments came home in sealed envelopes 3 weeks before the event. Every second-grade student had been given a role in the class's performance. A short musical number that Clara had designed herself, cheerful and inclusive enough that every child could participate regardless of musical talent. Lily's envelope contained different instructions. Lily Pendleton, Art Supply Coordinator. Please report to the backstage supply room 30 minutes before the performance begins and remain available to assist with materials as needed. Clara read it twice. Then she walked to the PTA planning office, a repurposed classroom draped with banners, and found Victoria at the head of a folding table, surrounded by clipboards and the kind of purposeful bustle that implied the organization of a state dinner. Lily was supposed to be in the performance, Clara said, setting the paper on the table. Victoria glanced at it. She's been reassigned. We felt her talents were better suited to a support role. You felt, Clara said carefully, that a 7-year-old should clean up paint supplies while her classmates perform for their parents. Support roles are essential to any production. We're teaching teamwork. You are deliberately excluding her. Again, Victoria's eyes went flat. Miss Evans, program assignments are a PTA matter. I'd encourage you to stay in your lane. A pause. Unless you'd like to raise a formal objection with Principal Higgins. She said it with a small, satisfied smile, because they both knew precisely what Principal Higgins would say. Principal Higgins, when Clara brought the matter to him that afternoon, adjusted his glasses and looked deeply pained. The PTA has considerable latitude in gala programming, he said. It's a long-standing arrangement. It's targeted harassment of a child. That's a very strong characterization, Miss Evans. He folded his hands. I understand your concern. I'll have a word with Mrs. Sterling. He did not have a word with Mrs. Sterling. What happened 2 days later was worse. It was a Tuesday morning, during the art session that Clara ran with genuine joy, the one reliable hour in which Lily was fully, uninhibitedly herself, her shoulders unhunched, her hands moving over the paper with a confidence she showed nowhere else. She was working on a landscape, a green meadow, a farmhouse, the kind of composition that had a spatial intelligence and a sensitivity of color that made Clara stop and look twice whenever she passed it. Emma Sterling noticed the bracelet first. It was a cheap thing, a little plastic bead bracelet that had fallen from Diane Whitmore's daughter's coat pocket sometime during the morning, ending up near the art supply station, close to where Lily was working. "That's mine," Emma said, pointing. Lily looked up, confused. "I didn't, she took it," Emma announced, standing. Her voice carried the clear, practiced projection of a child who has learned that volume equals authority. "She took Chloe's bracelet." "I didn't touch it," Lily said. Her voice barely cleared a whisper. Her face had gone the careful, shuttered white of a child who has learned that panic doesn't help. "It was right next to her stuff," Madison confirmed, crossing her arms. "I found it on the floor when I was getting more blue paint," Lily said. She looked at Clara. Her eyes were steady, but her lower lip had developed a very slight tremor that Clara had learned to recognize. "I put it on the table so nobody would step on it." "She's lying," Emma said. "Emma, sit down," Clara said, with the kind of firmness that permits no negotiation. "No one is accusing anyone of anything." But the damage, as Victoria Sterling had, Clara suspected, precisely calculated, was already done. By end of day, Victoria had sent an email to Principal Higgins describing an incident involving a student repeatedly found in possession of items belonging to other children. It was carefully worded. It used phrases like pattern of behavior and concerns regarding integrity and formal review. It carried 3 co-signing parent names. When Lily climbed into the truck that afternoon, she sat with her backpack on her lap and her hands folded on top of it, looking straight ahead through the windshield. She didn't speak for the entire drive home. Arthur watched her in the rearview mirror. He noted the posture, too upright, too controlled. The particular stillness of a child trying to make herself very small. "How was school?" he asked. "Fine," she said. "Art today?" A pause. "Yes." He waited. Then, "Daddy, what does it mean when someone says you're a thief?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Just slightly. "Who said that?" "Emma Sterling. And some other kids." She looked at her hands. "I didn't steal anything. I found Chloe's bracelet on the floor and put it on the table." "I know that," Arthur said. His voice was very quiet. "Do you believe me?" "Completely. Without question. Instantly." He said it with a precision that left no room whatsoever for ambiguity. "Lily, I have never once, for a single second, doubted you." She turned to look at the back of his head. "Then why don't the other people believe me?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the road ahead, but they had a focus to them that had nothing to do with the road. "Because," he said finally, "some people need to make others feel small so they don't have to feel their own smallness." He paused. "But that's their problem. And I am going to make absolutely sure it becomes exactly that, their problem." He called Margaret that night. His voice was quiet and very, very clear. "Move the timeline up," he said. The call came at 10:14 on a Thursday morning. Arthur was midway through a conference call with his CFO about a portfolio restructuring when his secondary phone, the one with Lily's school saved as a contact, buzzed on the desk beside him. He ended the conference call without explanation. He was in his truck 8 minutes later. He arrived at Oak Ridge at 10:41, still in his work clothes, faded jeans, the green flannel, steel-toed boots. He hadn't changed. He'd considered it, briefly, and then decided, not yet. He had a particular reason for wanting them to see exactly what they'd been so confident in underestimating. Principal Higgins' office had a long oak table that Victoria Sterling had somehow transformed into her personal tribunal. She sat at one end, flanked by Diane Whitmore and Patrice Lowndes. Emma Sterling sat in a chair against the wall, looking poised and satisfied in the way of someone who expects the verdict to go her way. Principal Higgins occupied the head of the table, his glasses slightly crooked, radiating the desperate energy of a man who knows he is about to make a bad decision and intends to make it anyway because the alternative frightens him more. Lily sat in a chair near the window, small in her brown sweater, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up when Arthur came through the door, and the relief on her face was so absolute and so raw that something in the room seemed to shift involuntarily. Arthur sat beside his daughter. He put one hand lightly over hers. "Mr. Pendleton," Principal Higgins began, with the careful tone of someone delivering bad news to someone they don't respect enough to feel guilty about. "Thank you for coming on short notice. We've asked you here because there have been ongoing concerns regarding Lily's." "There are no concerns regarding Lily," Victoria interrupted. She had not looked at Arthur when he entered. She looked at him now, a single, comprehensive look that inventoried his clothes, his boots, his posture, and found all of it wanting. "There is one very straightforward concern. This child has repeatedly disrupted the culture of this school. She has been found in possession of other students' belongings. And frankly," she leaned forward slightly, "this environment is simply not the right fit." "What environment would that be?" Arthur asked. "An environment of academic excellence and a certain—" She paused, selecting her word with care. "Social standard." "Social standard," Arthur repeated. His voice was mild, almost conversational. "I don't mean anything personal," Victoria said, in a tone that made clear she meant every personal thing. "But Oak Ridge is a school with a specific culture. Parents here have invested significantly, and when a child, through no fault of her own, of course, comes from another careful pause, a different background, it creates friction." Arthur said nothing. He was listening with his head slightly tilted, his dark eyes completely steady. "What Victoria is trying to say," Diane Whitmore added helpfully, "is that there are schools better suited." What she's trying to say, Patrice Lowndes cut in, having apparently decided that directness was a luxury she'd earned, "is that your daughter steals. Your truck is an embarrassment to the drop-off lane. And frankly, the scholarship program that allowed you to enroll here was a mistake we intend to correct." Silence. Lily flinched. It was small, just a slight contraction of her shoulders, but Arthur felt it through the hand that covered hers. "The scholarship program," Arthur said slowly. "We'd like Lily removed by end of week," Victoria said. "We're prepared to be gracious about this. We won't involve the police regarding the theft. We simply ask that you accept that this isn't the right place for your family and move on." She smiled. It was the kind of smile that has absolutely no warmth in it. "Take your family and go, Mr. Pendleton, before this gets any more uncomfortable for everyone." The door opened. Clara Evans came in fast, slightly breathless, a file folder pressed to her chest. She had clearly walked at speed from her classroom. She looked at Lily first, then at Arthur, then at the assembled women, and her expression settled into something clear and unwavering. "I'd like to be heard," she said. Principal Higgins looked pained. "Miss Evans, this is a private—" "There is no evidence that Lily Pendleton took anything," Clara said. "I was in the room. I witnessed the entire incident." She found a bracelet on the floor and placed it on the table to return to its owner. "That is not theft. That is basic human decency." She set the folder on the table. It contained a formal written account she'd clearly prepared. "I've also documented 3 separate incidents of deliberate social exclusion targeting Lily: the birthday party, the gala assignment, and the bracelet accusation. If there is a formal complaint being made here today, I would like mine entered into the record as well." Victoria looked at Clara with an expression of serene contempt. "Miss Evans, you are a teacher, not an administrator. If you continue to insert yourself into PTA matters, I will personally ensure your contract is not renewed." "My contract," Clara said, "is not contingent on your approval." "You might want to check that assumption carefully," Victoria said. "My family's endowment funds 3 of the 6 staff positions in your department." She let this settle. "Now please leave." Clara did not move. Principal Higgins cleared his throat. "Miss Evans, perhaps she stays," Arthur said. His voice was not loud. It was not heated. It was, in fact, very quiet. But it had a quality to it, a flat, certain authority, that made Higgins stop mid-syllable. Victoria looked at him with the first real flicker of something approaching genuine attention. "Excuse me," she said. "She stays," Arthur said again. He gently shifted Lily's chair closer to Clara's. Lily immediately leaned into Clara's side, and Clara put an arm around her without hesitation. Then Arthur stood up, and something in the room changed. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. He simply stood up. But the quality of the movement was different, not the stand of a man getting ready to argue, or to beg, or to leave with his dignity intact. It was the stand of a man who has decided, with complete calm, that a particular situation has reached its end. He walked to the office door and turned the lock. The click of it was small and very loud in the silence. Victoria started. "What do you think I think," Arthur said, turning back, "that you've been talking for quite some time. I'd like a turn." He crossed back to the table, and as he moved, something was happening that was difficult to articulate but impossible to miss. It was as if he was settling into a different register entirely. The habitual downward cast, the apologetic tilt of the shoulders that he'd worn like a costume for 4 months, all of it was gone. He stood at the table, and he was, simply, himself. He reached into the inside pocket of his flannel shirt and placed 2 items on the oak surface. The first was a black card, not a credit card, but something denser, matte, embossed in platinum. No bank logo, no decorative font, just a discrete sequence of numbers and a small falcon icon pressed into the material. The kind of card that existed in a quantity of fewer than 300 worldwide. Diane Whitmore recognized it. The color left her face with remarkable efficiency. The second item was a folded legal document. Several pages of dense print, a red notarial stamp in the lower right corner. Arthur unfolded it and laid it flat on the table with the unhurried confidence of a man placing a winning hand. "The Oak Ridge Unified School District," he said, "including all property, academic infrastructure, and administrative apparatus therein. Oak Ridge Academy, Millbrook Elementary, and Crestwood Middle School, was acquired in its entirety by Pendleton Education Holdings, a subsidiary of Pendleton Global, in March of 2021. He smoothed the paper with one hand. "I've been the legal owner of this school for 4 years. Principal Higgins made a sound like a man who has stepped on a rake in the dark. "The scholarship program," Arthur continued, looking at Patrice Lowndes, who had gone the color of old chalk, which you described as a mistake. "I funded it. Entirely. Anonymously. Because I wanted my daughter in a school where she could be normal for a while." He paused. "I apologize. I see now that was overly optimistic." Victoria was staring at him. The lacquered composure was still there, technically, but behind it something was happening. A reckoning. The slow and terrible arrival of a conclusion she didn't want to reach. She started. "Arthur Pendleton," he said, "CEO of Pendleton Global. Net worth, as of last quarter's public reporting, approximately $8.3 billion. Which makes me," he placed his phone on the table face up, "approximately 4 times wealthier than all of your husbands combined." He let this land. He gave it space to breathe. "And the sole owner of your children's school. Your PTA president position, Mrs. Sterling, is a courtesy extended by my administration. It was never a right. It was never even a particularly important courtesy." The room was absolutely silent. Lily, from her position against Clara's side, was watching her father with wide, astonished eyes. She had never seen him like this. She had seen him gentle and tired and funny and grief-worn and entirely devoted. She had not seen him like this, still as granite, clear as ice water, carrying an authority that didn't need to raise its voice because it had never needed to. Clara had not moved. Her arm was still around Lily. She was watching Arthur with an expression that was, for just a moment, pure and unguarded, something between awe and recognition. The look of someone watching a thing they'd only half suspected being revealed in full. "You can't," Principal Higgins attempted. "I can," Arthur said. He picked up his phone. "I'm going to make 3 calls now. You're welcome to stay and watch." He dialed. The first call lasted 45 seconds. He said, "Execute the Sterling position. Effective immediately." A pause. "All of it." "Yes." He ended the call. He dialed again. 20 seconds. "Whitmore Financial. Pull the institutional account. Today. And freeze the credit line." Done. Third call. Lowndes Group. "Tell Marcus the partnership review we discussed. It's over. As of now." A brief pause. "He'll understand why." He put the phone in his pocket. Victoria's phone buzzed first. She looked at the screen and went very still. Then Diane's. Then Patrice's, for seconds later. The sounds in the room changed. There was a new texture to the silence, something jagged and unraveling. "That," Arthur said quietly, looking at Victoria, who was staring at her phone with the expression of someone watching a cathedral fall in slow motion, "is what happens when the man you called trash turns out to own the bank." He looked at Principal Higgins. "You're fired," he said. It wasn't angry. It was entirely informational, the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis. "Your desk should be cleared by end of day. HR will be in contact regarding severance and any applicable review." Higgins opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Arthur turned to Clara. "Miss Evans," he said, and his voice was different now. Not softer, exactly, but human in a way it hadn't been for the preceding several minutes. "I'd like to offer you the position of interim headmaster of Oak Ridge Academy, effective immediately. Full administrative authority. Salary commensurate with the role. A beat. You can decline. This is not a condition of anything. But I've been watching how you treat my daughter for 4 months, and I cannot think of a better person for it." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at Lily. Lily looked up at her with those wide green eyes and said, in a small but entirely serious voice, "Please say yes, Miss Evans." Clara took a breath. "Yes," she said. The 3 calls had been the opening move. What followed was the endgame. By the time Victoria Sterling stepped out of the principal's office, former principal's office, as of now, her phone had received 4 more calls. The first was from her husband Bradley, whose voice she had never in 12 years of marriage heard at quite that pitch. "Vic, what? Do you know a man named Pendleton? Because our primary account has just been frozen. All of it. The operating fund, the personal accounts, the investment portfolio. Vic, that's $42 million behind a lock we don't have the code for. Our banker is saying the call came from Pendleton Global and he cannot override it. He literally cannot override it. What did you do? What did you?" She walked to the far end of the corridor and kept her voice low, though this required considerable effort. "Bradley, calm." "We are not calm. Our lawyer is saying the Pendleton Holding Company controls 3 of our 6 major contracts, and they're already pulling. The Hammond project just fell through, Vic. The Mercer partnership. We're looking at a strangled pause that contained multitudes. We could be looking at bankruptcy filings by end of quarter. What did you do?" She looked at her phone for a long moment after the call ended. Her diamond necklace, which she had adjusted so smugly an hour ago in front of a man she dismissed as trash, felt suddenly, acutely heavy. Diane Whitmore's husband Gerald called from his car, barely coherent, describing a conversation with their institutional broker in which the word insolvency had appeared twice in 7 minutes. The Whitmore family's banking interests had, it turned out, significant exposure to a Pendleton global credit facility that had just been, as the broker put it, with the specific apologetic flatness of someone delivering news they had no power to change, restructured and recalled. Patrice Lowndes discovered that the development partnership her husband's construction firm had been counting on for a major commercial project, one that represented approximately 60% of their revenue pipeline for the next 18 months, had been quietly terminated. The letter was in her inbox already, time-stamped 3 minutes after Arthur Pendleton had made his 3rd call. It was 2 paragraphs, professionally courteous, and absolutely final. None of it was illegal. None of it was even unusual. By the standards of the world Arthur Pendleton had spent 15 years building. He had invested in these companies. He had partnered with them. He had, for 4 months, extended them terms that were quietly more favorable than they deserved, because he had not wanted his daughter's school life to become a transaction. They had made it a transaction. He was simply completing it on his terms. In the parking lot of Oak Ridge Academy, under the pale spring sun, the 3 women sat in their respective luxury vehicles and made frantic calls and tried to understand how a man in a flannel shirt and steel-toed boots had, in approximately 11 minutes, restructured the financial landscape of their families' lives. The Bentley, the Range Rover, the Porsche Cayenne with STRLN1 on the plate, they sat in their designated premium spots, gleaming and immaculate, and the women inside them were learning, very rapidly, the precise and humbling difference between inherited comfort and actual power. Back inside the school, things were moving with quiet efficiency. Arthur had called Margaret immediately after the confrontation. Margaret had contacted the district's legal team, who had contacted the administrative board. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, temporary transition paperwork had been filed. By 3, a measured but absolute message had been delivered to the PTA office. All board positions were suspended pending administrative review. Victoria Sterling's key card for the PTA suite was deactivated with the same low-key finality as everything else Arthur Pendleton did. Stacy Beaumont, the 4th woman, The one who had contributed nothing of her own, but had nodded reliably at all the wrong moments, received a more modest consequence. A formal letter noting that her volunteer authority over the school events committee had been rescinded. It was the kind of letter that would have meant nothing to someone with thicker skin. To Stacy Beaumont, who had pinned her entire social identity on that committee, it meant a great deal. Clara, for her part, spent the afternoon in a state of quiet, functional astonishment, walking the hallways of a school she now formally administered and trying to process the preceding 4 hours. She had come in that morning as a second-grade teacher with a file folder and a willingness to lose her job. She was going home as, apparently, a headmaster. She stopped by her classroom before leaving. Lily's landscape painting was still on the drying rack. The green meadow, the farmhouse, the horse whose legs Lily had been laboring over. Clara studied the composition for a long moment. The spatial intelligence in it was instinctive and original. The color choices were bolder and more assured than they had any right to be for a 7-year-old. She placed a small gold star sticker in the corner of it, the kind she reserved for work she wanted to celebrate. Arthur was in the parking lot when Clara came out at 5:30, sitting on the hood of his truck in the late afternoon light, still in the same flannel shirt, still in the same boots, looking at his phone. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "You're still here," she said. "I wanted to make sure everything's settled before I left." A pause, "And I wanted to say thank you for what you did this morning, before any of the rest of it. I was just doing my job." "No," he said. "You were doing more than your job. You've been doing more than your job since September." He looked at her steadily. "I noticed." Clara felt something tilt, very slightly, in her chest. "I should warn you," she said, "that I have approximately 1,000 questions." "I know," he said. He almost smiled, and it was the same almost smile she'd seen him give his daughter, unguarded and a little surprised at itself. "There's a good diner about 2 miles from here. They have terrible coffee and excellent pie. We could start there." She looked at him. This man who had quietly dismantled 3 families' financial certainties with 3 phone calls and was now offering her bad diner coffee with the tentative air of someone who wasn't entirely sure he deserved the company. "Let me get my coat," she said. The school was different on Friday. It was difficult to articulate precisely how. The building was identical. The stone pillars, the bronze plaque, the manicured grounds unchanged. The classrooms were the same. The children arrived in the same way. But something had shifted in the atmosphere, the way a room shifts after a window has been opened and the stale air has moved out, and you realize only in its absence how much it had been weighing on you. Victoria Sterling did not appear in the drop-off lane. Neither did Diane Whitmore or Patrice Lowndes. Their children arrived, delivered by nannies, or in one case by a clearly frazzled Bradley Sterling in a 4-door sedan, his hair uncombed, his expression that of a man who has not slept, and the absence of their mother's performance was palpable. The drop-off lane moved faster. People seemed to breathe more easily without knowing precisely why. Clara stood at the school entrance in her new capacity, which still felt slightly surreal, and greeted each child by name. She had always done this. Now she did it with the additional, strange authority of someone who held a key to every door in the building. Lily arrived with Arthur at 7:45. She was wearing new sneakers. Not expensive. White canvas, clean and solid, with her name written in Sharpie on the inside, tumbed the way Arthur always did it. He'd taken her to the mall the previous evening, just the two of them. He'd let her choose whatever she liked. She'd chosen the exact same style she already owned, in a slightly larger size, on the grounds that she liked them, and they were comfortable, and those were the only qualifications that mattered. Arthur had felt his heart break open in the best possible way. When Lily walked into the classroom that morning, several of her classmates said good morning as if it were entirely ordinary. And it was the most ordinary thing in the world, just a 7-year-old arriving for school, and yet the ease of it, the simple normalcy of it, made Clara press her lips together briefly before she trusted herself to smile properly. Emma Sterling arrived late, subdued, and sat at her desk without making any announcements about anyone's possessions. The change in the classroom's culture was not total. These things are never total overnight, and Clara knew that better than anyone. But the specific, sanctioned cruelty, the kind that had thrived because it was backed by the implicit authority of powerful, untouchable parents, was gone. The roof had come off the machine that had been running it, and without that cover, The machine simply stopped. By mid-morning, Clara received the first apology. It came from Stacy Beaumont, who appeared at the school office with her daughter and a look of unmistakable, genuine mortification. She was a slight woman in her mid-30s who, without Victoria Sterling beside her, seemed to occupy about half her usual square footage. "I'd like to speak with whoever is." She stopped when she saw Clara behind the desk. "Oh." A pause. "I heard. Congratulations. I think." Another pause, shorter. "I wanted to. I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe Lily an apology. I didn't stop any of it. I didn't do a single thing to stop any of it. And that's," she swallowed. "That's not okay." Clara studied her for a moment. "No," she said. "It isn't. I know. The apology I'd like you to make," Clara said, "isn't to me. It's to Lily. If you mean it, tell her yourself. She's in classroom 7. Stacy Beaumont walked to classroom 7. She knocked on the open door. Lily looked up from her drawing with those wide, serious green eyes. "Hi, Lily," Stacy said. Her voice was unsteady. "I'm Emma's mom's friend. Or I was. I want you to know that I'm sorry for the way you've been treated. You didn't deserve any of it. And I'm sorry I wasn't braver." Lily regarded her with a seriousness that transcended her 7 years. Then she said, "Thank you for saying sorry. My dad says sorry is the most important word there is, but only if you mean it." "I mean it," Stacy said. "Okay," Lily said. "You can go now. I'm working on my horse." Stacy left. Clara, who had been watching from the corridor, allowed herself one small, private laugh. Victoria Sterling's apology, if it could fairly be described as one, arrived through her attorney later that afternoon. A formal letter acknowledging that certain comments made by Mrs. Sterling may have been inappropriate and offering a donation to the school's scholarship fund as a gesture of good faith. Arthur's attorney replied with 2 sentences. The donation was declined, and Mrs. Sterling's access to all school facilities had been permanently revoked. Arthur did not want Victoria Sterling's money. He had considerably more money than Victoria Sterling would ever see. What he had wanted from the beginning, which was so simple and so human that it embarrassed him to think about, was for his daughter to walk through a door without flinching. That afternoon, sitting in his truck in the parking lot, he watched Lily come out of the school building. She emerged with another girl, a small, gap-toothed child named Rosie, who had sat beside Lily in art since September and had, in the new social landscape of the classroom, found her way to saying hello properly. They were walking close together, both of them animated, entirely absorbed in whatever they were discussing, and Lily was laughing. Not the careful, provisional laugh she sometimes offered adults. The real one, bright and unself-conscious and completely her own. Arthur leaned his head back against the headrest and let out a long, quiet breath that had been waiting, he thought. For months he picked up his phone and sent a message to Clara. Not business. Not administrative. She laughed today. The real laugh. "Thought you should know." The reply came back in 3 minutes that I saw. "I was watching from the window. You should see the horse she finished today. The legs are perfect." He sat there and smiled at his phone like an idiot for a full 30 seconds before putting it away. They had their first real conversation. Not the urgent, compressed kind of the preceding weeks, but a slow, honest one. On a Saturday afternoon in late April. Arthur had offered coffee. Clara had expected the diner again. Instead, he'd suggested the park 3 blocks from Birchwood Lane, and she arrived to find him on a bench with 2 paper cups from a corner bakery and Lily a short distance away, crouched at the edge of the duck pond with a fistful of crackers. "She'll feed them until they stop coming," Arthur said as Clara sat beside him. "And then she'll be sad they're full," which seems like a life lesson waiting to be explained to someone. Clara laughed. "How is she doing?" "Really? Better." He handed her a cup. "She slept through the night without waking me up twice." "That's new." He watched Lily throw a cracker with surgical precision. "She used to come into my room at 2, 3 in the morning. Since her mother died, she'd just stand in the doorway. She'd say she was fine, but she'd stand there until I said, 'Come on then, Lily Bear,' and she'd get into the bed." Clara was quiet, listening. "She hasn't done that in almost 2 weeks," Arthur said. "That's significant." "I know." He turned the paper cup in his hands. "She started talking about her mother again. Not in the grieving way, in the ordinary way. Like telling stories. She told me last Tuesday that her mother used to perform terrible kitchen dances to make Lily laugh. She said it like a memory, not a wound. He paused. It's the first time in over a year. Clara watched Lily throw another cracker into the pond with great deliberation. She told me about her mother once, she said. She asked if I thought kind people go somewhere nice after they die. I said I genuinely believed so. She smiled. She seemed satisfied, like she'd been waiting to ask someone. Arthur made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else, not quite either. He was quiet for a moment, turning his cup. I pulled back from everything because I didn't know what else to do, he said then, without preamble, as if he'd decided to say something directly and was simply doing it. After Sarah died, I had offices in 7 countries, 240 employees, a board of directors, a charity foundation I'd spent 15 years building, and I walked away from all of it. I went to live in a rented house on a street I'd never heard of, and I drove a truck, and I made eggs every morning, and I fixed gutters on weekends. A pause. I don't regret it. I want you to understand that. But, Clara said gently, but you can't give a child simplicity by subtraction, he said. I took everything away, and I thought the space I left would fill with something clean. Instead, it was just space. And she walked through a world that didn't know to protect her because I'd made myself invisible. You were protecting yourself, too, Clara said. She said it without judgment, entirely as an observation, offered without attachment to how he received it. He looked at her. He had the expression of a man who has just heard, said plainly aloud, something he'd been carefully not thinking. Yes, he said, I was. The ducks had finished Clara's crackers and were now staring up at her with the pure, unabashed expectation of creatures who have never once doubted their own worthiness. I'm sorry, she told them. That's all there is. They did not appear to believe her. You grew up modest. Arthur asked. It wasn't prying. He said it with genuine curiosity, with the particular quality of wanting to understand rather than to compare. Middle class, in Ohio, she said. My dad was a high school history teacher. My mom managed a dental office. We had enough. We had a lot, really, by the things that actually count. Books everywhere. Sunday dinners that lasted 3 hours. My mom playing piano badly and insisting with great conviction that she was improving. She smiled at the memory, fond and clear. I wanted to teach because of my dad. He made history feel alive. He used to say, she paused. What? He used to say that the most important thing a teacher does isn't transmit information. It's make a child feel that what they think matters. Arthur was looking at her in that steady, attentive way he had. The way that made you feel genuinely heard. Not as a social courtesy, but as a simple fact. I believe that, he said. I've watched you do it. With Lily. He paused. With all of them, but with Lily specifically. The way she talks about your class. Not what she learned, but how she felt in it. Like it was safe. I love them, Clara said simply. That's mostly what it is. You love them, and it makes you pay attention. The afternoon light was soft, the trees around the pond in early bud, their new leaves the specific bright green of a world just beginning to trust the warmth again. Lily had found a stick and was dragging it through the water's edge with meditative concentration. I haven't, Arthur started. He stopped. It's all right, Clara said quietly. I was going to say, I haven't enjoyed a Saturday afternoon in a long time, he said. He looked at his cup. I'd forgotten what it felt like. Sitting still somewhere and not, he thought about the word. Not accounting for anything. Clara felt something warm move through her, careful and unhurried. The way warmth moves through a house on the first cold morning when the furnace comes back on. Arthur, she said, you are allowed to be happy. I want you to know that I think that very specifically. He looked at her. It wasn't a quick look. It was the kind of look that takes its time because it wants to understand what it's seeing. I'm working on it, he said. And then, after a moment, I'm getting better at it. Lily called from the pond. Daddy, there's a duck with a green head, and I've named him Gerald. Very distinguished name. Arthur called back. He knows it. Lily informed them seriously. He looked up when I said it. Clara laughed. Arthur laughed. The sound of it, both of them at the same time, in the afternoon sun, by a duck pond while Lily conducted introductions, was unremarkable in every measurable way and entirely, precisely perfect. They sat until the light went long and golden. Neither of them hurried that it was a Saturday in late June when the world, in its quiet and unhurried way, became complete. The meadow behind the Birchwood Lane house was in full bloom. The landlord had turned out to be a passionate amateur gardener, and the backyard had a wild section that came up every June without being asked. Tall grass and late spring wildflowers, clover and Queen Anne's lace, a corner of lavender gone beautifully overrun. Arthur had spread 2 large blankets on the grass and set up a wicker basket with the kind of deliberately old-fashioned picnic contents that Lily had helped pack with enormous seriousness the night before. Cheese crackers, apple slices, a thermos of lemonade, and a foil-wrapped loaf of banana bread that she had made herself, with some adult guidance and a great deal of flour on the counter. Clara arrived at noon, carrying a bunch of slightly bedraggled wildflowers she'd picked from the roadside. Having forgotten the arranged ones on her kitchen table and deciding these ones were better anyway. Lily saw her coming through the back gate and ran across the grass in bare feet, the hem of her yellow dress catching the air, the rabbit tucked under one arm. Clara crouched, and Lily wrapped both arms around her neck, and Clara held her the way she had learned to, fully and without reservation. The way you hold a child who has needed it and is finally beginning to let herself be held. I brought the drawing, Lily said importantly, pulling back with shining eyes. She ran back to the blanket and retrieved a rolled-up piece of paper, carrying it with the two-handed reverence of someone transporting something fragile and precious. She unfurled it carefully. It was a portrait, done in pencil and colored pencil, with the particular focused intensity Lily brought to her serious work. 3 figures, a tall man in a flannel shirt, a woman with dark hair, and a small girl between them. They were holding hands. Above them, in Lily's careful second-grade print, she had written, "My people." Clara looked at it for a long time. "It's beautiful," she said. Her voice was entirely steady. She felt it owed the picture that. "I've been working on it since February," Lily said, studying it critically. The hands were hard. Hands are harder than horse legs, in my opinion. "I believe you completely," Clara said. Arthur had appeared beside her, looking at the drawing over her shoulder. Something moved through his face, quiet and undefended. The same expression Clara had seen when he watched Lily laugh at the duck pond. A man fully present in his own life, allowing himself to be. He looked up and found Clara looking at him. They had been in this careful, honest, unhurried thing for 2 months now. Sunday mornings at the bakery, long evenings on the Birchwood Lane porch after Lily was asleep. A 4-hour walk through the Arboretum on a rainy Saturday when the whole world was gray and green, and they talked and still hadn't said everything they wanted to. He had told her about Sarah, the whole of it, not just the death but the marriage, the good years and the harder ones, and the sorrow of a life cut short before you'd found out what it would become next. Clara had listened the way she listened to everything, entirely, without agenda, without any apparent need to do anything with it except understand. He had not told her he loved her yet. He'd been careful with it, the way you are careful with the one thing you cannot afford to ruin. That he thought he was almost done being careful. "Do you want to eat first?" Or, he started. "Miss Evans," Lily said. Clara turned. "Yes, sweetheart." Lily looked at her with those wide, green, serious eyes. She had her hands clasped in front of her, in the pose she assumed when she was about to say something that mattered. "I know you're my teacher," she said. "I know that's the thing you officially are. But you're also—" She searched for the right word with the focused patience of someone who has learned that the right word is worth waiting for. "You're also the person who gave me cocoa when I was sad, and who put the gold star on my horse painting, and who came to the principal's office even when it was scary." She paused. "Then you come here on Saturdays and you laugh at my duck stories, and you tell me my drawings are good, and you're just always there." She took a breath. "You feel like a mom person," she said. "Is that okay to say?" Clara was quiet. She was absolutely going to be fine. She was a professional. She had a perfectly composed relationship with strong emotion, and she was completely, entirely. Her eyes filled. "Yes," she said, crouching down to Lily's level and taking her face gently in both hands. "That is absolutely okay to say. Could I?" Lily's voice dropped to something very small. "Could I call you Mom? Not instead of my real mom. She's still my real mom, and I know you're not her. But she's not here, and you're very here." A pause, thoughtful and earnest. "And I think she would have liked you. She liked people who were kind and not afraid." Clara's throat was tight. She looked at this small, serious, extraordinary person who had somehow, in the middle of everything, decided that she was worth trusting. "I would be honored," she said, to be called Mom. Lily's face opened like a window thrown wide on a bright morning. It was the most complete, unguarded joy Clara had ever witnessed on a human face, and she had been watching children's faces for 6 years. "Dad," Lily announced, spinning around. "I called her Mom." "I heard, Lily Bear," Arthur said. "Are you happy?" He looked at Clara, who was still crouched in the grass, laughing and crying at the same time without apparent embarrassment about either. "Yes," he said. "I'm happy." He sat down on the blanket. Clara sat beside him. Lily positioned herself between them immediately and began distributing cheese crackers with the decisive efficiency of a general deploying resources. The sun was warm on their faces. The wildflowers moved in the small, easy wind. Gerald the duck was not present, being several miles away at his own residence. But Lily mentioned him twice in the first 10 minutes, and with full confidence that this was relevant information. "I was thinking," Arthur said after a while. He was looking at the sky. "There's a house on the north side of town. It's been on the market a few months. It has a proper backyard, big one, a swing set, 3 bedrooms, and 1 room with a north-facing window that gets the best light all afternoon." He paused, still looking up. "I thought it might make a good art studio." Clara looked at him, he looked back at her, and his expression was the most unguarded she had ever seen it. Open and careful, and a little bit afraid in the way of someone who is hoping very much and is honest enough to let it show. "If that's something you'd want," he said. "All 3 of us." She took his hand. She held it. "Yes," she said. The same word she'd said in the principal's office when he'd offered her the school, and it had the same quality to it, clear and certain and needing no decoration. Lily, who had been listening with the acute attentiveness of a child managing a very delicate negotiation, said, "Does the art studio have good shelves? I have a lot of supplies." "Floor to ceiling," Arthur said. "And is there a yard big enough for a dog?" Arthur looked at Clara. Clara looked at Arthur. "We can discuss the dog," Arthur said carefully. "That means yes," Lily informed her rabbit, with satisfaction. The 3 of them sat in the afternoon sun with their crackers and their lemonade, and the drawing of my people held flat against the blanket by a small jar of roadside wildflowers. They were, collectively, a not particularly remarkable sight to any passerby. A man in a flannel shirt, a woman with a practical bun, and a 7-year-old girl with crayon on her fingers and half a piece of banana bread in her hand, sitting in the grass on a summer Saturday. They were, by any actual measure that mattered, the wealthiest people in the meadow. Not because of the $8 billion, or the Gulf Stream in the hangar 30 miles east, or the school district with 3 campuses and a bronze plaque about legacy. Not because of any of the things that Victoria Sterling had tried to wield like weapons and found, in the end, to be nothing more than noise. Because of this, the ease of it, the safety, the specific, irreplaceable comfort of sitting in the sun with your people and knowing in the full, settled way that admits no doubt, that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Lily leaned her head against Clara's shoulder. Clara rested her head lightly against Arthur's. He looked up at the blue sky, wide and indifferent to everything except being itself, and he thought of Sarah. Thought of her clearly, and without the old flinch, the way you think of someone you have learned, finally, to carry rather than be crushed by. She would have loved all of this, he thought. She would have loved them both. He sent the thought upward, into the blue, because some things deserve to be sent somewhere. "Daddy," Lily said. "Yes, I'm very happy." She said it simply, as a fact reported, the way she reported things she was certain about. He closed his eyes. The sun was warm. The wildflowers moved. "Me too, Lily Bear," he said. "Me too."